Good morning and welcome back to Next Level Ed Leadership Interview Prep. Before we get to today's research observation, I just want to let you know that we have a brand new resource. It is a comprehensive list of more than 170 questions and scenarios from superintendent interviews. They are pulled right from our case studies. It also contains the research-based response strategies to help you prepare for your interview. It's completely free. Just go to nextleveledleadership.com and go to the resource page. And if you scroll down, you'll find it about 2/3 of the way down. All right, let's get started. Imagine you just completed the first round of a superintendent interview. You're sitting in your car, mentally reviewing your answers. You're feeling pretty good. You think, I explained the problem. I explained the decision. So why didn't my response sound as good as I hoped? Maybe I shouldn't be feeling so good. That's exactly what many superintendent candidates experience. I'm one of them. As candidates, we believe once we've explained the challenge and described the decision, the work is done. But what if the board still doesn't know the most important part? What if they still don't know what you were willing to give up to make that decision? As I continued analyzing superintendent interviews, this is what I noticed. The strongest finalists didn't simply explain the constraint or the decision. They consistently revealed something some of the candidates never mentioned. Every executive decision required a trade off. Sometimes it was time or resources, other times it was political capital, or it meant disappointing one stakeholder group while helping out another. That observation led to today's research finding. Most superintendent candidates prepare for interview questions. School boards are evaluating something else. I'm Jonathan Royce. Through executive interview intelligence, each episode explores the leadership signals, decision-making patterns, and executive behaviors that influence superintendent hiring decisions so you can make your executive leadership visible before the board makes its hiring decision. Recognized as one of the top 10 K-12 podcasts on Podomatic, Executive Interview Intelligence is built on the analysis of real superintendent interviews to uncover the hidden executive evaluations taking place throughout the hiring process. We've analyzed more than 170 superintendent interview questions and candidate responses, broken them down into their component parts, and created practical tools like the ones I just mentioned that save you time, reduce anxiety, and provide a systematic way to prepare for superintendent interviews. So that way you can focus on leveling up, accelerate your professional trajectory, and prepare for a future where you're leading a district and improving students' lives. This is Executive Interview Intelligence Research Observation number 86. Executive leadership isn't revealed when you describe the decision. It's revealed when the board understands the trade-offs you were willing to accept and why you believed that those trade-offs served students better than the alternatives. Let me show you what the research began to reveal. So one of the case studies, one school board asked the finalist, describe your leadership style. How do you balance being collaborative and inclusive while still making difficult decisions when consensus cannot be reached? That's a superintendent interview question about leadership, or at least that's what most candidates think. But after reviewing the case study, I realized the board was asking something much deeper, something beneath the surface level of that question. They weren't trying to determine whether the candidate was collaborative. They were trying to determine what happened when collaboration no longer produced agreement. One finalist explained, I'm going to seek input. I'm going to gather perspectives. But at some point, the superintendent has to make the decision. That's a strong response. The candidate establishes the constraint, the need for collaboration, then the executive decision. Someone ultimately has to decide. But listen carefully. The strongest part of the response isn't the statement that the superintendent makes the decision. It's the executive judgment behind when collaboration has reached its limit. That's what reduces uncertainty for a school board because executive leaders understand that consensus is valuable, but leadership cannot depend on that unanimous agreement because that is not going to happen. A different committee approached the same executive evaluation from another angle. They asked, Describe a situation where you had to make a difficult decision that wasn't initially popular. How did you navigate that process? The finalist responded, you have to stay focused on what's best for students, even when not everyone agrees. Again, strong response. Most candidates would stop there, but the research suggested something else. The board still doesn't know what competing priorities had to be weighed before that decision was made, what alternatives were considered, what risks came with each option. Why was one path selected instead of another? Without those answers, the board hears conviction, but they don't fully see executive judgment. That response doesn't need a different story. It just needs a little upgrade. Then another interview question revealed the same research pattern. In this case, the committee asked, how do you build trust with the Board of Education while also maintaining your responsibility to provide honest recommendations that may not always be popular? One finalist explained, I don't operate based on surprises. And then he went on and continued, I think each and every board member needs to be kept in the loop through email, text, phone calls, weekly updates, and individual meetings. That's excellent leadership. The board learns the communication strategy, but notice what creates that board confidence. Not the weekly updates, it's not the phone calls or the newsletters, it's the executive decision behind them. The candidate has decided that trust is more valuable than convenience, that preventing surprises is worth the additional time and effort. That's the trade-off. The superintendent accepts more work to reduce uncertainty and surprises for the board. And suddenly, the committee isn't simply hearing about communication, they're seeing executive judgment. Across these case studies, that same pattern continued to emerge. Executive decisions never exist by themselves. Every meaningful superintendent decision requires giving something up: time, resources, political capital, convenience, popularity. The strongest finalists didn't hide those realities. They acknowledged them because school boards know leadership always involves competing priorities. When candidates reveal the trade-offs they accepted, their executive thinking becomes more visible, and that's what creates confidence for the school board. They can see that thinking in action. Today's research observation changes the way we think about executive decision making during superintendent interviews. The strongest responses don't simply explain the constraint, they don't simply explain the decision. They reveal the trade offs that made the decision difficult in the first place, because school boards already know there are rarely perfect decisions in district leadership. Every important decision requires balancing competing priorities. Again, resources, time, relationships, community expectations, student needs. The question isn't whether you face these difficult trade offs. Every candidate has. The question is, can the board see how you navigate them? As we continued analyzing superintendent interview case studies, another pattern became impossible to ignore. The candidates who consistently created executive confidence from the school board didn't pretend every decision produced unanimous agreement. They demonstrated that they understood what had to be gained, what had to be sacrificed, and why those trade-offs ultimately served the student and the district. That's what separates describing leadership from making executive leadership visible. In our next episode, we'll complete the upgrade formula by examining the final component of the decision chain, the leadership signal. Because every school board understands the constraint, the executive decision, and the trade-offs, there's still one final question they're trying to answer. What does this response tell us about the kind of superintendent this person will be every single day? They're looking for consistency. They're looking for those leadership signals. If you're listening on your way to or from work, when you get back to your computer or safely pull over, please visit analysis.next-level-leadershipinterviewprep.com. The link is in the description. You can record one of your superintendent interview responses and see whether your decision making is creating executive visibility before the board makes its hiring decision, because you already know what you're saying. The real question is, what is the board hearing? If you found today's research helpful, please leave a 5-star review. It helps other educational leaders discover executive interview intelligence and supports the continued growth of this research. And until next time, remember, most superintendent candidates prepare for interview questions. School boards are evaluating something else.